Welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast. Whether you're a tech enthusiast or novice, there's something here for everyone. I'm Liz.
And I'm Allie, and together we're your hosts.
Join us as we dive into the world of technology, implementation, and management.
From hearing expert insights to exploring inspiring stories of tech impact, we cover it all.
We'll interview technology users, configurators, and leaders where we discuss driving effective tech adoption in businesses.
Tune in to laugh, learn, and leverage the power of technology. The future is tech-driven. Let's navigate it together. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Dynamics Hot Dish. This week, we have a really special guest with us on. We have Mary Myers from World Max, and we're really excited to talk about community a little bit with Mary here and then dive into some Business Central type conversations. But before we dive into that, Mary, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Mary Myers. I've been in the Dynamics community going on 6 years now. I'm super obsessed with Business Central and all things Power Platform. And then I love being super involved with the community as well. I currently live in lovely Florida, just about 45 minutes south of Tampa. So enjoying some gorgeous weather here today.
Mary, I have so many coworkers that are in that Tampa, south of Tampa area. It's kind of funny, but it seems like a really nice area to be. And Liz and I are in Minnesota and we have some terrible weather today. So we're happy to hear that it's nice for you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's a beautiful place. I like to be here. So
awesome. Cool. Well, thank you. So you mentioned community. I know you're super involved in the community. Liz and I have both met you at community events in the past. So tell us, how did you first get involved with the community? How are you involved with the community?
Yeah. So, honestly, how did I first get involved with the community? I got into consulting and I was absolutely clueless and lost. I was an F&O consultant. I had no clue what it meant to be a consultant. Even until my first day, I'm on site. That's when I figured out what I was supposed to do. And so I realized that I really was not great at my job because I was clueless. And so I found forums and I found the community, honestly, right? And so it was getting involved in the community is really what allowed me to not sink when I got into consulting. And I found friends and I found just this really amazing group of people. And so I'll often say, I waited my whole life to feel like I belonged somewhere. And that's how I feel about the community. That's honestly how I haphazardly got involved, is I was clueless, right? But I found forums, I found people on Twitter, I found people on LinkedIn, right? And I just found this community of people. And I, like everyone else, I'd go on YouTube. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd go on YouTube, right? Help, how do I do this, right? So then I'd find different people that were specialists in their area. And then I'd go and find them on Twitter. And, that's how it all came to be. And I just love it. So I have this huge passion to always give back, right? And continue to make sure that it's this amazing space for everyone, because I certainly would be lost even to this day, right? I still to this day reach out to the community when I'm lost and don't know what to do. So.
Well, and you're such an active part of the community. I know you're talking about how the community supported you, but you said, you give back in all sorts of ways. I see you doing so much with so many different aspects of the community. So I'm always continually impressed by, your capacity to give back and just do such a great job. On that note, I'm curious, what conferences or events have you gone to so far this year and what's on your radar?
Ooh, it's already been such a busy season. I limited myself to no more than 2 events a month, which has been, I know.
That's a lot.
It's been a ton. And let me say, I will only travel far to 2 events a month. So what have I been doing this year? So it's, we're going into May right now. Golly. So in January, what did I do? In January, I had an opportunity. I was asked to go to New York City and be part of the AI tour with doing some Copilot workshops or Copilot Studio workshops with April Dunham. So that was super exciting. And then I sponsored the M365 community days in Miami in January. I think I went to some Doug user groups in Dallas in January. So I've been doing a lot of, there's a couple different roadshow user groups. Really what it is, right? Like we're just getting into the conference user groups right now, like kind of thinking off that thing, but I love the community so much. I love being a part of it. So I was like, I don't want to wait for just a few days a year, a few times a year, right? So what I've been doing is going to some of the larger user groups. There's two main like amazing user groups in the community. They're both awesome. One being Dynamics user groups and others being Dynamics communities, right? And so they both do kind of a larger regional show. So I've been traveling a lot to those. So I've been to Dallas a few different times for those. I've been to, where else did I go? Oh, I was at up at Redmond. There was the MVP conference, and then we had a user group, like a Pacific regional user group up there. I was just recently in San Diego for Directions North America. Tomorrow I'll head to Orlando for the Community Days conference out there. And then in like 2 weeks, I'm going to Denver for Dynamics Con Live. So
we'll see you there. We're excited for it.
So, that's just a few of the things that I've been doing recently, which is just a lot, but I love it. So
that's impressive.
And I know Liz and I got invited out to a couple of conferences too, and we're just like, 2 a month sounds like a lot. And Mary, you're like, I'm limiting it to 2 a month. I give you a lot of credit for doing all that, but it's awesome because your name is out there. The community knows you. The community loves you. You're there to help. And I think it's excellent what you're doing. And also, I'll make a plug, but the Dynamics communities just did one of their road shows in Minneapolis, and you did not come to that one. So
we missed you.
Time.
I know, and it really hurt my heart. That's actually the first one that I've missed so far. I do plan to be at their Chicago one, but for me, honestly, so the limitation was the fact that it was the same month as Directions. So I just spent like 6 nights in San Diego, right? And like my son's like, "Are you ever coming home?" So. These other times that I'm traveling, it's usually just like 1 or 2 nights, right? And so like it may be that I'm gone like 4 nights an entire month, and like that's not that bad, compared to like 6 nights at once. So that's why I wasn't in Minnesota. But yeah,
that's a very valid reason. Yeah. I'm obviously a CRM Power Platform focused person, so I've never been to Directions. So I'm curious, can you just share a little bit about that conference and what it's like and what it covers?
Yeah, so Directions North America is what I would consider the largest Business Central partner event in North America for the entire year. Microsoft, for example, I think is their biggest platinum sponsor. I think they actually had like 40% of the sessions out there. So it's not like a Microsoft conference, but it is one of the biggest ones. Like, in my opinion, anyone that's working with Business Central, I'm always like, are you going to be at Directions? Because if you're working with BC, you should, right? Especially if you're a partner. It's a really big partner-focused event, but you're going to see end users there as well. There was probably about 2,200. Could be wrong. Maybe there's 12,000. I could be lying about numbers. I get them a little bit confused sometimes. So let's say there was between, let's say, 1,000 and 2,000 people, just a small range. I think it was like 1,200 people, you know what I mean, that were there. It was the 3-day long event, session packed, super awesome. Great time to get like one-on-one time with Microsoft and their product team as well. So.
Mary, do they throw in any Power Platform stuff into Directions, or is it pretty heavily BC?
You know what? I love that question. So there's more and more Power Platform now, right? So this was my 3rd year going into Directions. And the first year that I went to Directions in North America, honestly, my sessions didn't get picked. I put all BC Power Platform, that's my gig, right? Like extending that out. Nothing got picked. They're like, we have Ryan Cunningham giving a power or keynote. We don't need anything else. I'm like, solid, fine, right? So nothing that year. Then last year, I actually co-presented with Microsoft on Power Platform and Business Central, right? And there was like a handful of sessions, right? But this year there was several sessions. Several different people doing Business Central, Power Platform, which I'm really excited to see, right? Because I feel like I've been out there with, some other people really just trying to push how much the Power Platform can do to Business Central for several years now. So it's awesome to see, more Power Platform growth there.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And I feel like that's what we're seeing at a lot of these events, right? Because Power Platform is the extensibility platform. You can plug it into all the Dynamics applications, use it to extend them. So I think that trend is going to continue. And I bet we're going to see more and more Power Platform just embedded in like any of the industry events.
Exactly. I see it as an interesting cross product, you know what I mean? Like opportunity. Sometimes I feel like they're like, where do we put them? I don't know. Try put it in a cross product because you can, right? Like we can use the Power Platform to cross product all of the applications.
Absolutely. Well, and here's another question for you. So Liz mentioned earlier, she's CRM. I'm CRM historically as well. We know a lot of our audience is CRM now, also Power Platform. For those who might not be familiar with Business Central, can you give a little bit of a lowdown on what Business Central is, what it does?
Perfect. So a couple different ways to talk about Business Central. So it's an ERP system. It's Microsoft's small business ERP system, right? That's like the nice marketing terminology for it. ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. What does that mean? You have to, as a small business, you're going to put sales orders in somewhere and you're going to put purchase orders in somewhere, right? We have to track our sales orders, like our sales going out, and essentially our expenses coming in a nice way so that our CPA or accountant doesn't hate us at the end of the year and we know if we're actually making money, right? That's essentially what an ERP system is, really just making it simple, assuming that nobody knows what an ERP system is, right? So that's kind of the simplest way to talk about it. Another way that I like to kind of use some keywords is saying, do you know what QuickBooks is? Because QuickBooks has been around for so long, right? And so most SMBs are very familiar with this awful product called QuickBooks because it was what was around forever, right? And until Business Central came into the factor. So if you don't know what ERP system is, but you do know what QuickBooks is, think of Business Central as Microsoft's better version of QuickBooks.
I'm going to go off script because I'm a new QuickBooks user. We just graduated from a spreadsheet this year for TechFluent. And I don't feel like we're big enough yet for Business Central. So for all of our really small, organizations listening that might be on QuickBooks still and considering when to move to Business Central, what would you tell them? Like, what's that threshold?
Liz, I think that that's a really great question that you'd say. And I would honestly go back to looking at different things like cost. Okay. Because, you say, hey, we just graduated from, we're in QuickBooks now. And again, I'm not trying to hate on anyone that's on QuickBooks by any means. My mom ran her own business like when I was growing up, right? And so I used to sit in there like 12, 13 years old, like running QuickBooks for her. So I understand why we're all like in the QuickBooks world. But I appreciate the downside of QuickBooks. And so me as a small business, the first thing I did, one of my proudest moments was buying my one license Business Central subscription because I've done solutions. Do you know how many trials I have done? You know what I mean? How many demos I did for years of pretend World Max Business Central trial demos, right? And like, that's what I was like demoing. And so when I finally got to the point where I was like, cool, I'm my own company now, like clearly we have to have a solid ERP system and I cannot do anything but Business Central. So for $70 user a month, I just have my one person. Like, I don't know how many people you guys have signed in, but here's the thing that I know. I'm going to be able to grow forever. I have a $20 attached sales pro license. So I'm, you know what I mean? I'm drinking my Kool-Aid. And for me, that little bit of cost is so worth it for everything that I can and go do. So your question was, when should people, you know what I mean? I say it really is kind of a personal choice. I don't recall right now. I don't know what the current rate for QuickBooks pricing is. Usually they have it be, in the past when I've looked at it, it's usually about 50% a month cheaper than what Business Central is on that first year for what they're going to give you. But then you're still going to run into the same issues, right? It doesn't matter if you're a 1 person or 10 person people or 20, 100 people using QuickBooks. You're still going to have upgrades. You're still going to have these things where they're going to get you right at the end. And so I really say it's a personal decision with me, like my pink little rosy colored glasses on. I'm always going to say, I think that you should go to Business Central, but I do have the benefit of, I didn't have to pay anyone to set it up for me. I know how to set it up. Yep. Right. So there is some small consideration factors there to consider. But again, some small business owners, like, how did I learn Business Central? I went on YouTube and I learned it, right? And so unless you come knowing QuickBooks, you're probably going to have to YouTube QuickBooks. So I don't know. It's all hit or miss. And, really just kind of look at your costs and don't just look at the short-term costs, but also look at those long-term costs, because I'd be willing to bet that Business Central may not be too much more expensive than something like QuickBooks, and really just kind of say, what's my 2-year plan, my 3-year plan? How quickly do you plan to grow, and that type of factor? And like, how much integrations to other products do you need, right? Like, what does that whole landscape look like? So super clear answer.
We'll put it on the roadmap. Okay, so the follow-up. So first of all, I guess before I ask my next question, so there's no kind of minimum license count. Like, you can purchase just one license for Business Central and deploy it. I think that's pretty cool. Like, I know we've had minimum license counts for CRM in the past. I guess I don't know if we still do, but I like that there's no sort of like, you have to buy 5 or 10, and then it just makes it kind of unattainable for a small business.
Absolutely. That's what I really like about it. That's what I think, that Business Central can be whatever you need it to be, per se, right? Because you can just do one all the way up to like unlimited. Microsoft's not going to be like, no, we're not going to sell you any more licenses. So
okay, so then obviously there's multiple Microsoft ERP products,
yes.
2 that are kind of modern day and 4 in total if we're talking about the legacy ones. So what's the difference between Business Central and FinOps?
Yeah, that is one of my favorite questions. And so fun facts, I think I maybe highlighted this just a second before. I used to be certified on F&O, right? I was an F&O super user before I became Business Central. So that was one of the questions that I would get asked all the time. And my early answer, right? So high level, again, I'll start off with our nice Microsoft marketing answer. FinOps is going to be, for your commercial level customers, enterprise, point blank, you're looking at least $250,000 implementation, right? Like, at least that's what you're getting out of. You're usually having several users as a count, and that project is going to be usually at least 6 months long. 6 to 18 months long is what you're looking at for a big, finance application project, lots and lots of money. And also, so that's the marketing version of what FinOps is, right? Compared to Business Central, which we said is, kind of smaller base. Even with FinOps, there's an interesting thing. Even like when you go live, you have to notify Microsoft. Gosh, I want to say, now I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember if it's 30 days, 90 days, or 6 months, but there's 60 days. But there's an actual time frame that you have to notify Microsoft before you're going to go live, because then they have to come certify your financial system before they will let you go live. Like, that's how insanely different it is, right? From like a Business Central or a CRM implementation. So a lot of money, a lot of complexity. There's also like a million different ways to do something in finance and operations. So this is where I used to say, like, with finance and operations, like, you tell it what your business processes are going to be, right? Because there's like 13 different ways to enter a purchase order. And depending on a company, right, you're like, well, where does your purchasing team sit, right? Like, you do all the requirements and you identify which one of these 13 ways is the best suited for them. When something like Business Central, there's like one way to do it, okay? So Business Central tells you what you're going to do, which is again why it's like less complex. But I would say that like now you bring in the Power Platform, right? Now you can make Business Central kind of ebb and flow and be what you need it to be. You can make it as small as you need it to be, and you can use the Power Platform to extend it and honestly make it be as big as you need to be. So when you're transitioning from some of these legacy systems like GP, right, or SL, and maybe you have a really great warehouse management system that's doing a really great job for you, but the financials are not what you need them to be, right? And so you want to keep your warehouse managing system, but you need your financials, then you can extend it out and not have to go into something like finance and operations. So that's really the differences between them. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even know if that's so super clear, just like all of my answers here, but you know, in the good old consulting world, it just depends, right?
Yes.
I can tell you're a Business Central fan. Like after that explanation, I'm like, why would anyone want to be on F&O?
Well, you know, and it's so interesting because there's still opportunities or there's still times and needs for it, right? You're still going to have industries due to volume that need to be in there or due to different security reasons, or sometimes, you know, there are limitations to Business Central. But to your point, I do think that there is always a good opportunity for customers. And our F&O partners don't love this theory as much, right? But like I'm all the time telling like customers, like if you have a partner that's only pushing you into F&O, you should ask. You should ask, what is the limitation? Why can't I be in Business Central? What add-ons can we put in there? Because as a customer, you're going to save yourself a lot of money if it's the right situation for you, right? I do love Business Central, but I don't want to be like, oh, it's the only thing out there. So let me not say that either.
So when you're kind of doing discovery requirements gathering, are there any sort of really big red flags or things that could come up from a process or requirements perspective where you're like, that automatically like doesn't work for Business Central and we should steer them to F&O?
I'm going to look at things like offline capabilities, transaction counts, complex manufacturing. Those are things that I'm personally going to, you know, sit there and say, hey, let's take a look at like F&O. But there are some really, oh, little puppy.
Sorry.
No,
you had to come up.
Love it. There are some super complex Business Central partners that, you know, they really excel in manufacturing. And so they're able to think more outside of the box to say, hey, I can make manufacturing, you know what I mean? Like do this. So those are things that I would personally look for and be like, hey, I don't want to handle a Business Central deal that kind of like looks like that. But, what I may suggest, like I said, other Business Central partners may be like, we do that all the time. Cool. That's what they do.
And I think the other thing too is I'm learning that the ERP systems and Business Central is one of them, but ISVs. So like with CRMs, we don't really, there are some ISVs that come up, right? But it's not something that's common, I would say, on a lot of our projects. But it seems like the ISVs come up a lot with Business Central implementations.
It's a major staple part of the ecosystem. In fact, I would say, right? Because business, like, and it really lends into where I say Business Central can be whatever you want it to be. And ISVs are a large part of that. You know, sometimes some ISVs you'll throw on top of there and Business Central no longer even looks or acts like Business Central. There's some ISVs, I don't know why the heck they break the entire product. I think that they're like scamming customers, right? And then there's others that make it really great. So yeah, it really, really has a big part to play in there.
And I think too, like I finally got to use Business Central for the first time on a project. We did a BCCE implementation, so I got to learn it. Yay. And let me tell you, I really like the interface of BC. There's even certain things that come up where I'm like, oh, they should do this in CE. Like, it's just really nice. Like, I like the search. I like that the screens kind of like open on top of each other and you can hit the back button and like close it. And like, I don't know, there's just some navigation stuff that's real easy. The whole homepage where it shows like summary of sales and all of that. It's just like easy on the eyes.
Yeah, it's fun to hear you say that because that's one of the things that I like to hear about is I feel like it's super user intuitive. I feel like that search bar makes it, really helpful as well. So, but again, I mean, I'm just sitting here very much clearly drinking my, Business Central Kool-Aid. So it's good to hear somebody else, also appreciate, the user design too.
Liz, you know what else they can do? See, now I'm excited talking about it, Mary, but they can actually like customize their forms. Like, so if they're on an account, they can choose what fields they want to show up like on their account.
Like as a user.
Yeah. Like,
so it's like personal views, but we have personal forms. So
yes,
we need that.
Yeah, exactly. It's cool. It's like, hit this button, add these in. It's like, wow, that's actually really, really nice.
It's a good, and they've added more Power Platform components to it, because as small businesses, I think that's really what I get excited about, right? Like as a small business, I can use Business Central, and you know what? I can go out there and like act like I'm this big company. Right? Because I have access, like my, like the tools I'm using. I can send automated emails. I can take credit card payments and have that automatically integrated with my Business Central, system. I have a CRM system. When I close something in CRM, it automatically creates my orders in Business Central. You know what I mean? So it's pretty cool. That's what I like about it.
So, Mary, you just mentioned that CRM, BC integration. I mentioned I just did a project of the same with the integration. Do you work with a lot of customers, or have you been hearing anecdotally that there's a lot of people who are trying to connect those two products?
Yeah, golly, it goes in ebbs and flows, to be really honest with you. I feel like I get some mixed messaging on that. Some people I'm like that are in Business Central, they're like, why do I need a CRM system? Or why can't I just use the CRM system in Business Central? Well, I mean, and you could use the CRM system in Business Central. I don't think it's, I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it's lacking in some areas, right? But, then like I have one of my friends, she's like, why should I have a CRM system, right? And I'm like, here's why, and so I take her through like the whole different reasons and like what I'm doing and like how I capture my leads and able to like market out and stuff. So, so high level, I hear some small businesses, right? Because again, Business Central can be for so many different sizes of companies. Some small businesses aren't integrating because they're not understanding why they should yet, right? But I do see more people say, okay, well, how about that attached license, right? And then I hear some people say, don't give them that Sales Pro attached license. It's not enough power compared to the enterprise license, So there's some mixed messaging on whether or not people need it. Sometimes like last year, I think it was last year, I'm pretty sure it was last year at Directions, or it was the year before. I cannot remember the exact year. They did the $20. It was last year, the $20 attached license. Okay. So the April, May last year, April, May, June, I heard some more excitement saying, hey, let's integrate, right? Then that kind of has fallen off like the wayside. Now as Business Central's hitting some larger customers, I hear people again being like, okay, well, let's integrate. And it's ironic. I'm hearing people want to integrate with Salesforce. I'm hearing people want to integrate with Sugar. I just did a big implementation off of Sugar for a customer last year, Zoho. So I do hear a lot of BC CRM integrations. The one that I don't hear tons and tons about is the Microsoft to Microsoft. You know what I mean? Like integration yet. So I do think that will continue to like spike and come. But yeah, interestingly enough, and I've done plenty of them like that, but it's just not the biggest one that I do. So.
And I feel like it kind of is surprising, but only because I work in the space, I think. But for all of the CRMs that you named too, like Monday.com comes up, I feel like all of those are kind of your super quick start CRM tools. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like for you to be coming in and implementing Business Central, I'm not surprised that they have something else, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's why I see, like, think that there will be like a marriage, right? That eventually like gets there. Because to your point, the ones that I just mentioned, those are the quick, easy, cheap startups. So we would expect that they would go into something like Business Central, and then, you know, there'd be an opportunity for them to go into CRM. Let me switch this up. Let me ask you a question, right? Being on the other side of things, how much of your whatever questionnaires, like how many BC integrations do you do, or at least get questions about doing for those type of integrations?
It's coming up a lot more, I would say. I've been on a lot of F&O CE integrations,
Yep.
especially with like the rise of dual right, and it's
Yeah.
finally becoming somewhat easier to
Yeah.
get those platforms integrated. But BC has definitely been coming up more and more as well. And I think that you're right about the talking point of, well, why can't I just use CRM within BC? And let's face it, ERP implementations are expensive. So when it's like, let's get this implemented, oh, let's also implement CE for you, that can be a tough decision for some organizations to make, right? But it can also, like a CE implementation can be small. If you want to stick to like a lot of the out of the box functionality, and especially with people who are familiar with implementing it, it doesn't have to be expensive and it can be pretty quick to implement as well. And I think those are the situations that I see coming up with like BC is, hey, we need a CRM system. Let's integrate it. But I think what's going to be good for Microsoft as time goes on too is to make that integration easier. I know, like, I've been one of those people that when, like, a few years ago when I was hearing, oh, we're upgrading from AX to finance and operations, it's like, okay, cool. Well, that'll be a lot easier to integrate to CRM. No, it's not. And I think that's the same thing with BC now with, I guess, the Dataverse connector, right? But I think as it gets easier to integrate, it might become more popular. Maybe that's my theory.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's crazy that you bring up that integration, right? Because, you know, we can dive into that for a second. That integration piece is another interesting component, you know, in it, because there's the Dataverse connector. And I'm going to tell you, I stood last year in Orlando, and the product manager's name is Sandy Wanko, who's over the Dataverse connector for the Business Central Power Platform. And I went to a session afterwards, and I was like, I really don't like your connector. It's just way too difficult. I just use straight Power Automate flows to begin with. It's a lot quicker and simpler, and I'm getting the same thing done. And he was like, yeah, do you know what the problem is? And I was like, no, there's no problems that I see. And he was like, there's a capacity issue, right? And so what I realized is, while I thought, like, I didn't think that his data connectors honestly were great because of the complexity, I didn't realize that some of the issues that I was having creating these same types of flows were because, like, throttling issues. So it's funny to know now. I'm like, okay, cool. So this is clearly I'm the issue, right? Hi, it's me. So I've had to learn to understand how to work with that, you know, Dataverse integration more. And I think, to your point, like, some of the documentation, some of that communication needs to be a little bit easier. But it actually still doesn't work for if you have custom fields, right? So if you're using custom fields in Business Central, you're not going to be able to use that Dataverse connector. You're going to have to look at a couple different things. You're going to have to look at your capacity. You're going to have to look at how many flows you need to come through, because you may have to just create a data flow connector with your custom ones, or create a custom API and run it through Power Automate. But yeah, some things to look at in that integration. But why I brought that up, though, is I just want people to know that, like, maybe you're like me and thought I'm not using it because it's really difficult and I can create Power Automate flows easier. You may get yourself in trouble if you do that. So be warned.
You know what, though? There are still parts of the documentation, like the Dataverse connector documentation, that say to use Power Automate flows if you want to speed up your integration. Because I think, like, the Dataverse connector, I guess you can get it down to like 1 minute, right? Is like the lowest you can integrate with. But then there's parts of the documentation where it's like, if you want to make it instant, set up a Power Automate to do this. So I don't know if it's intended to like do one-off scenarios or like what the intention is there, but it does say in some parts to like use it for certain things.
That's really interesting to know, and I'm definitely going to go find that and be like, hey, here's here's some things that I suggest that we add to the documentation. You know, you should use this. But know that if you need over X amount of flows, you mean like records, right? Because basically it was like I was trying to pull a table, right? Like from some other system, and they had over 5,000 records, right? And so it only grabbed the first part, and then it was like airing out, which you're not going to know that in the first part of an implementation until you hit, you know what I mean, later on, long after that project's gone live, right? And so I think that these are important things to know because it can trick you. Whenever you first set it up, you're like, yes, I'm awesome. Everything's working right? Joke's on you.
And that's for sure where Microsoft is lacking in a lot of the documentation, where like, you know, giving feedback or providing anecdotal evidence of, hey, you should add this in is really helpful, because a lot of the documentation is just, here's how you do it. And it's not like, but consider this and consider this and consider this. And some of it has started to get that. But I think overall it doesn't really specify all that stuff.
Yeah. I think that's on us as users a lot of times, you know, kind of like ebbs and flows, because it's like when I work with the Microsoft teams on just like different things for Business Central, right? Like their team is really great at creating these different things, but sometimes I'm like, I love what you've done here. However, in the real world, users will tend to go to the right instead of the left, you know what I mean, on this scenario. Right. And they're like, oh, really? And like, they have no idea. Right. Like they build this really great product, but like, that's not, you know what I mean, their role on that side. So a lot of times it's like, I feel like they're super receptive if we give them nice feedback, right? Like you get more flies with honey than you do like punching them in the face and being like, you suck at everything. So tips.
I've never tried to punch a fly before, Mary, but maybe no.
Yeah. Yeah, be real quick.
No. So we talked about Power Automate for integrations. What other Power Platform applications do you use to extend BC, or do you like to use?
You know, I use all of them. So love doing Power Apps as well. I think that that's another like fun component that you can use in different ways. A lot of people do it for inventory. Honestly, like what I'll do sometimes with my Power Apps for Business Central, I'll even do some CRM components, right? Like I've done this for somebody before, just using business card scanner to OCR it into Business Central. They started their CRM process there, right? So sometimes we'll do like different apps like that. You can even do like measuring, like, you know, salespeople. I've had sales order delivery applications for delivery drivers, right? So sometimes, again, when we're talking about Business Central and applications, there's custom, there's ISV, or there's Power Apps. Right? So there's always an opportunity for customers and partners to say, should I use an ISV or should I use an app for like a Business Central? Copilot Studio is a really cool one too, right? Because we can bring our Business Central data to and from. I recently did a demo for somebody where we're going to have their sales or their like chatbot or their Copilot Studio enter sales orders into their Business Central system, right? Just kind of again, just asking that information. Nobody ever has to do that. So we're saving them, you know, for $500 a month. They decided that they could not find a sales rep cheaper than that. So that's what they're doing for that project. Power Pages is a really new, exciting, hot one because they're making that a lot easier to integrate with Business Central. So again, when we're looking at, do I go for a super, super expensive like e-commerce platform where a lot of them are like $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 to integrate with Business Central, or do I use something like Power Pages, right, and get it done maybe in like $7,000, $10,000 to $15,000, you know what I mean, and still have that same functionality. So that's really exciting. And then I always say like Power BI is like the gateway to the Power Platform and Business Central. You tell a bunch of accountants that you're going to give them, you know what I mean, better reporting and dashboards. Like they get really excited. Like that's the easy thing. It does not excite me at all. Like I do Power BI work, but it's like, there's so many other cooler things to do than build pie charts and dashboards, in my opinion, right? Like I want to make the magic happen. So
yeah. Which is fair. And I know there's people on the opposite end too who just like their niche is the Power BI reports. And like
a lot of people
get
love Power BI.
And that's, and that's why there's an opportunity for everyone. There's so much, you know what I mean, to go around. Again, like my team can do it, right? Like we're definitely capable, but at the same time, it's like you gotta focus on like what you love and which gets you excited to get out of bed in the morning.
Totally.
I don't build Power BI reports either, so I get it.
Mary, what tips, advice, guidance do you have for someone listening that wants to learn more about Business Central or the Power Platform?
Yeah, so my number one tip is to get a demo environment or developer environment for both of them, right? Just go like heads in to it, learn, create your own company, right? Like what type of business would it be that you run? And if you're like, I can't even think about that, I don't know, how do you operate your expenses in your household, right? Like have that be like your demo company. But I really think it's important to just dive in and create like things for yourself, right? Also, so one is you have to have a place where you can actually like use the tools, right? Like get a free version of tools that you can use the tools and have like a personal concept so that you can roll through, you know what I mean? Those things, but you're still going to need some like know-how. So, there's tons of opportunities for learning. There's Power Apps in a Day. There's some free BC online training courses. There's Learn documentation. There's blogs. There's YouTube. There's TikTok. There's LinkedIn, right? So there's a bunch of different ways that people can learn. So I always recommend people a couple different things. One, like know what your learning format is like the best, right? Like I have ADD and cannot read through blogs, right? So I'm going to be a video girl. And if you have an hour-long video, I know I'm not going to watch that, right? So I know specifically like what type of content like I'm looking for. But I would also say make sure that you try to have a couple different types of content as well and follow a couple different people. Because you're going to get a well-versed perspective on it. And podcasts, that's another thing that I would say, podcasts. Like double your time, right? So how would I call this? I can't think of the right words right now, but it's like, I just always try to like make the most use out of my time. So maybe I'm going to go for a walk, throw in like a business applications podcast. Mark Smith has great stuff. This is a great podcast to be listening to as well, right? As you're walking and talking, because it's always about, it's not just the technical components, you know what I mean? It's having a broad understanding of the ecosystem in general will help you be better at like what you're doing. So just fully dive in and immerse yourself with as much as possible. Just become super obsessed with Dynamics and the Power Platform and your life will be amazing and great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. I think it's always good to have resources and definitely podcast community. We talked about all of that. Follow Mary on LinkedIn and Instagram. And are you on TikTok?
I am. You can find me at the Power Platform Partner.
There you go. All right. Well, Mary, as we're approaching the end of our time here, we always like to close out our episodes with our signature question. So We'll have to ask you, what is your favorite kind of hot dish?
I have to tell you that I saw that on your things and I was like, what is a hot dish?
Fair. I mean, you said Florida too, and it's totally a Midwestern thing. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. And that's what it said. So then I had to think about, well, what is my favorite hot dish? So one I will say would be like a traditional green bean casserole, but if buffalo chicken dip is considered a hot dish, then that would be it. But I don't know the full terms on qualifications.
That's a good question. I make my buffalo chicken dip in a crock pot, and I think a hot dish has to be made in the oven. But do you guys make it in the oven?
Yeah. I will say I've seen people put it in with tater tots and stuff too. So I've seen like buffalo chicken tater tot hot dish. So we're making up stuff.
Cool. So if I put tater tots and put it in the oven, then it's a hot dish.
It qualifies.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll get Kristen to make us a hot dish at Dynamics Con, and we'll share some buffalo chicken tater tot hot dish.
Yeah, we gotta find someone with a kitchen and an oven and have a hot dish bake off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Another question for you. Green bean casserole has come up several times, and I like to check, do you eat that just at Thanksgiving, or do you make it other times of the year?
No, I only eat it at Thanksgiving.
Okay, that's been the collective answer so far. So it's a once a year food. Why is that?
Yeah.
Like, why is it never made at other times?
I don't know for other people, but here's the thing, like my son does the majority of the cooking in my house. So whatever he makes is what I eat. And he doesn't make it any other time of the year, but sometimes he will make it at Thanksgiving. So that's why I only eat it then.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. Right, Mary. Well, thank you for your time with us here today. We really appreciate you joining us. And Liz and I are extra excited to see you in a couple of weeks in Dynamics Con. So Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see y'all. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Dynamics Hot Dish, your go-to podcast for all things Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media for even more insights and updates on the latest trends and best practices in business applications and low-code development. We'll be back soon with another delicious serving of Dynamics and Power Platform goodness. Until then, keep innovating and building great solutions.